Hello everyone, welcome to another analysis of one of the 20 CSEC English B poems. I am Tivia Mckenzie, and this week we'll take a close look at the poem South by Kamau Brathwaite. This poem is a series of poems entitled Rites of Passage, in which Brathwaite explores responses to the alienated result of slavery's Middle Passage, where persons were transported from West Africa to the Americas in the second leg of the triangular voyage, which began in Britain. I know from experience that this particular poem is one of those poems that some students often hope to not meet on their CSEC English B exams owing to its length and complexity. However, be not dismayed, for I am here to take care of you through my line-by-line analysis of the poem's stanzas, poetic devices, tones, moods, and themes. However, before we do so, let's begin by reading the poem. South by Kamau Brathwaite. But today, I recapture the island's bright beaches, blue mist from the ocean rolling into the fishermen's houses. By these shores I was born. Song of the sea came in at my window. Life heaved and breathed in me then the strength of that turbulent soil. Since then I have traveled, moved far from the beaches, sojourned in stonier cities, walked in the lands of the north in sharp slanted sleet and the hail, crossed countless saltless savannas, and come to this house in the forest where the shadows oppress me and the only water is rain and the tepid taste of the river. We who are born of the ocean can never seek solace in rivers. Their flowing runs on like our longing, reproves us our lack of endeavor and purpose, proves that our striving will found on that. We resent them this wisdom, this freedom, passing us toiling, waiting, and watching their cunning declension down to the sea. But today I will join you, traveling river, borne down the years of your patientest flowing, past pains that will wreck us, sorrows arrest us, hatred that washes up on the flats, and moving on through the plains that receive us. Procession in turmoil, come to the sea. Bright waves splash up from the rocks to refresh us. Blue seashells shift in their wake, and there, in the thatch of the fishermen's houses, the path made of pebbles, and look, small urchins combing the beaches look up from their traps to salute us. They remember us just as we left them. The fisherman, harking the surf on this side of the reef, stands up in his boat and hollows us. A starfish lies in its pool, and gulls, white sails slanted seaward, fly into the limitless morning before us. The poem consists of 6 stanzas with a fairly regular rhythm of 4 stressed syllables in each line, but it has no rhyme other than the us song, which occurs with growing frequency in the second half of the poem. And you will realize that this is because the persona shifts from I to us and we, which suggests the persona's deep involvement with his or her homeland in spite of his or her travels. One will find that the title of the poem is appropriate because it refers to the southern hemisphere, which literally refers to half of the earth that is south of the equator. The title also refers to those countries, islands, and/or continents that are geographically located south of the United States, Canada, and Europe. Notably though, the title of the poem is a strong indication of the persona's longing for his or her homeland while residing in the north, as he or she journeys farther away from its cities to the south, which is welcoming and full of promise. Stanza 1 begins, but today I recapture the island's bright beaches. Notice the use of the word but to begin this stanza, right? When but is used, it is often used to introduce a phrase or clause contrasting what has already been mentioned or said before. So something was said before. Maybe in the past, the person has said, as you go along the poem, you'll realize why, that I'm no longer going back to the south. You know, the person maybe had some excuses or some different conclusion or resolution about his decision that the person has made now. Regardless of what was said then, the person is saying, but today, but now, I recapture the islands, okay? The word recapture there can mean that the person is taking a mental journey. The person is about to embark on a physical journey, okay? Because the word recapture means to experience something again, or even to gain control of a place or a position after losing it. So maybe it's a case where the persona has now decided for him or herself that he or she is going to recapture or retake his or her identity. He or she is going to recover what was lost, okay? Maybe it's a sense of identity, maybe that experience of being in the South. The persona, however, has decided that today I am going to do something about it. I'm going to experience it again. And notice that the person is going to experience the islands, not just one island, which suggests that it is not a case that the persona wants to remember, for example, what transpired in St. Vincent, but the persona is recapturing or hoping to recapture what that particular experience that can be found in the different islands in the territory there. And notice what the persona will recapture: bright beaches and the blue mist from the ocean rolling into the fishermen's houses. Notice the use of the alliteration in B, in bright, the alliterated B in bright beaches and blue, even in the word but there, right? So alliteration in this case, it emphasizes the beauty of the beaches, okay, and accentuates the song made by the sea, as we will see in line 4. So when the person says that the blue mist from the ocean rolling into the fishermen houses, notice that the besides the different examples of visual imagery, because it appeals to a sense of sight, where we can see that the beaches are bright and we can see the blue mist from the ocean, right? Pay attention as well, besides the fishermen houses and the shores, which are examples of visual imagery. Pay attention to the personification. Notice that the blue mist from the ocean, they seem to be rolling into the fishermen houses. I want to highlight that freedom of the mist to actually enter the fishermen houses as if they are one. And it therefore shows and suggests that the South is very welcoming, okay? And this is why the persona has decided to recapture the islands, okay? The persona went on and the persona says that by these shores I was born. So the person has confirmed that I am from the South. I grew up next to the shore. Okay, this is where I was born. So basically where the person is at the moment is not him or her home territory or home country. The person went on through the use of alliteration, even auditory imagery, says, sound of the sea came in at my window. These are some of the memories that a person has of the shores and even those islands which he or she is recapturing. And of course, the use of the auditory imagery there, the sound of the sea, it allows the persona to feel, or the reader to feel, as if he or she can hear the sea, the actual sea there. Okay, just like the use of the alliteration in line 2 and the bright beaches, we can therefore visualize a sea that is very vibrant, okay, and very clear and beautiful. The person went on and says that the sound of the sea came in at my window. We see another freedom there, just as the blue mist from the ocean in line 2 of this particular stanza. We are seeing too that that freedom is even seen in the song of the sea and the way in which it came to the personal window. This freedom seems to suggest that even though the persona might have traveled to the north for whatever reason, maybe for financial freedom or better freedom, social advancement, whatever the reason, there seems to be a freedom that exists in the south that cannot be found in the north. Hence the persona's decision to recapture or to regain that experience again, okay? The person also says that life heaved and breathed in me then. So the person remembers that when I was in the south, I felt alive. I felt alive, and these are the things that made me feel alive. The bright beaches, the blue mist, even the mist as it rolled into the fishermen's houses, even the song of the sea. Life actually, I felt energized. I felt like I could have done anything, but it suggests too that this is not how the person is feeling at the moment as well. The person even went on and said, then with the strength of that turbulent soil, okay? The word turbulent can mean moving very strongly and suddenly, and even also full of confusion, violence, or disorder, not stable. It therefore suggests that where the person is from, they probably had some political upheaval, right? So the person was perhaps invigorated then with the energy coming from a place undergoing political or even social upheaval, which may be resulted in the person's migration or travels away from these shores. However, the person is remembered that life heaved and breathed in me. I felt alive when I was in the south, when I was next to the beaches, when I heard the sound of the sound of the sea. right? So also in that last line, the person says, then with that strength of that turbulent soil. So even though there were upheaval there were confusion and violence and disorder, that is what strengthened me, okay? So remember that the person is recapturing, the person is remembering a particular experience again, and as a result, the person is sharing with us what made him or her feel alive then in the past, okay, and the reasons why the person is deciding to, take this journey, this mental journey, be it mental or even physical. Okay, on my right here we have some examples of poetic imagery which I have discussed as we embark on a line-by-line analysis of stanza 1. And don't forget the examples of diction there. Use any of them, give the definition, give how they're used in the poem, and comment on how they aided your understanding of the poem. Okay, so stanza 2 begins, since then I have traveled, moved far from the beaches. So the word since then at the beginning of stanza 2 means within that time. Okay, so within that time I have traveled. I have moved from the south to the north. The person gives us a bit more information and says that he or she has moved far away from the beaches, far away from the south, to a place in the north where you will not find many beaches, as many as you will find in the south. So I have moved from the beaches, sojourned in stonier cities. The word sojourn there means to stay somewhere temporarily, okay, especially somewhere that is other than your home, which tells us that the person did not intend to make the north his permanent home. However, he sojourned in stonier cities. Stonier cities can mean literally the buildings that's there. And not that there aren't any tall buildings or buildings in the Caribbean, but it's a case where wherever the person resides in the north, that there is a vast number of large buildings as well. Okay, stonier cities can also be seen metaphorically as the character or the personality of the people who are from the north, meaning that they are cold, they are unfriendly, they are unwelcoming as well. Okay, the person goes on and says that he or she, while walking in the lands of the north, that such a walking had to be done or was done in sharp slanting sleet and the hail. Now, a sleet is actually rain containing some ice, as when snow melts as it falls, okay? So the person says that he or she walked in sharp slanting sleet. Sharp, there's an example of tactile imagery as well, and we see an example of the alliteration, the S that's being alliterated there in sharp, slanted, and sleet, okay? However, as it relates to the tactile imagery via the word sharp, we get a sense that the reader can imagine the painful windblown, half-frozen rain and the icy pallets of hail that the person had to endure, whether he or she had to walk in or sojourn in such a weather in order to get up or to go to a job, or even to go about his daily activities. So, but however, the person says that in sharp slanting sleet and the hail. Hail are actually pieces of ice that fall from clouds like rain, okay? It basically tells us that the person did not enjoy such a weather, okay? However, he or she left the south to live to the north for maybe political or social, even personal advancement, right? And we can see why the person is recapturing, right, the bright beaches, recapturing or having this experience again of where he or she grew up. The person went on, however, in line 4 and says, cross countless thoughtless savannas. Okay, so the person has walked across countless. Countless is an example of a hyperbole because the person exaggerates the number of savannas he or she actually crossed or traveled on while he or she resides in the north. Okay, we know this is an exaggeration, but basically it's really there to underscore the dull and unstimulating nature of the savannas of the north. Notice that this is so why it is unstimulating to the persona, because the persona highlights that they're actually saltless. It tells us that the persona misses the beach, right? Because the persona has traveled through some savannas, and savannas are actually open grassland, okay, in tropical areas of land. So even the persona would have crossed them, traveled through them. They are unstimulating because they do not have rivers, they do not have beaches. So there's other examples which suggest that really and truly person was not happy in the north, which is why he or she is recapturing the bright beaches and the experiences that he or she experienced while in the south. And the second to last line says that line to the top into that second to last line says, and come to this house in the forest, which suggests that the person has found a home in a place that resembles a forest. Maybe we know that a forest usually have different trees and so on. Maybe the person decides to live here because the forest reminds him or her of the vegetation, the lush vegetation that can be found in the Caribbean. But even though the person has found a house in the forest, notice that the shadows oppress me. The shadows oppress me is an example of personification, because we see that the shadows having that quality of oppressing the persona, because the word oppress there means to persecute, to abuse, to maltreat, or even to make someone feel uncomfortable or worried, and even sometimes ill. Okay, however, shadows in that case is an example for metaphor, because it refers to the people and the buildings of the north, to say that they are unwelcoming, they are cold, and they are friendly. And notice that they are being described as shadows, as if they are always following the person, which suggests that the person might even have to be looking over his shoulder because of his skin color, or maybe because of his accent, or God knows what. He or she always had to be looking out for him or herself, which also further suggests that the person did not feel safe in the north, sorry. And the last line of stanza 2 says, and the only water is rain and the tippy taste of the river. The person saying that in the north, all you can find is rainwater and the tippy taste of the river, which suggests it's an example of gustatory imagery, the tippy taste, because it appeals to the reader's sense of taste. Now, the word tipping means that it's not cold and nor is it hot, right? And it tells us that the person is really not energetic and excited about living in the north, okay? And that's one of the reasons why the person is recapturing this experience of being born in the south. So we have there examples of poetic devices, and of course the examples of visual imagery there. We can visualize a person moving far from the beaches, sojourning, which temporarily living in stony cities, walking in the land of the north, and even the hills, and even the shadows oppressing him, and so on. Okay, so these visual imagery, with the use of these visual imagery, the reader is able to visualize the person's travels and movements away from his or her homeland to countries located in the north. The stanza 3 says, we who are born of the ocean can never seek solace in rivers. So the person is saying, we who are from the south, we who are from the ocean, we who are from the Caribbean can never find comfort or consolation in a time of distress or sadness in a place like the north. We have to return to the south for healing, for revitalization, for energy. Okay, remember the person that says one thing about the south is that life heaved and breathed in me when he or she was in the south. Even the very song of the sea, okay, actually made the person alive. So the person is saying that we who are born of the ocean can never find full satisfaction, full freedom, full love, full welcoming in a place like the north. So we who are born in the ocean can never seek solace in rivers. Notice that the person is using the metaphor of a river to describe the north. What we know about rivers is that rivers are always continuous. They're always flowing, they're always progressing, they're always on the go. Notice too that the ocean is used to describe the south, or for the Caribbean, really to show not just its timelessness, but to really show its vast differences and its unique composition, right? I tend to think of places like Trinidad, which is considered to be a melting pot of people of different ethnicity and different people and different language. Okay, when you consider the ocean and the different creatures that are in there, the variety is so vast that it's very, very hard to actually say that you can describe everything that is in it, or even to list all of the creatures that are in it. So the idea is that you cannot leave the Caribbean for a place like the north and find true satisfaction, right? Because in the Caribbean, it has something that you can find in no other places on this earth. Okay, so we who are born of the ocean can never find comfort and satisfaction in rivers, in a place like the north where you'll find stony cities, okay, and even the tippy taste of the river and so on. Notice that the person that gives us additional information and says their flowing runs on like our longing. Their flowing there is still referring to the way of life, or the way in which the north does things. Okay, their progression, the way in which they go about doing things, it's always continuous, it's always going. So the person that says that their flowing runs on like our longing. Like our longing and their flowing is an example of a simile, right? This comparison reveals the Caribbean or the South ongoing desire for healing and even contentment. So they're saying that their flowing is likened to our longing, which is saying basically that there's this yearning for the Caribbean to regain their identity or to be healed from the post having been colonized and even from the effects of colonization. That longing can be even seen as a person's desire to get back to the South. Okay, so their flowing runs on like our longing. And notice that the person says in line 3 that it reproves us our lack of endeavor and purpose. So basically what the river or the north, this is a criticism of the river to the South, that it reproves us, it actually reprimands us or scolds us for our lack of the endeavor and purpose. There's some persons who are not from the South, not from the Caribbean, especially persons in the North, they're ignorant and they sometimes think that persons are in the Caribbean just sipping coconut, not walking. I remember there was a time I was at a church, visiting a church in the Kingston area of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. A tourist ship came in and a tourist slipped in and she sat next to me, and I remember her asking me, do they have schools here? Do they have supermarkets? I was like, yes. And I told her that, I'm actually a teacher. We have several hospitals. We have professionals here, like anywhere, across the world. And she was so shocked. I mean, I didn't even get where she was from. But there's some persons who feel that the Caribbean is just a place for recreation. And persons are just on the beaches there, just sipping coconut for the entire day. There's no civilization happening here. So when the person says that they scold us for our lack of endeavor and purpose, the person is basically saying that they believe that we do not have any ambition, we do not have any purpose within ourselves to be a better people, to actually grow. Okay, notice that after that, in the 4th line, the person says that it proves that our striving will founder on that. They're saying that the striving that we are having, or for whatever reason, right, even though they do not understand the way in which we go about building our society and healing from, for example, the slave transatlantic slave trade, right, whatever, from them looking on, they think that what they said will prove that our striving will fail on that, will fail on the fact that we lack endeavor and purpose. But notice in the second to last line, the person is like saying back to sender, we resent them this wisdom, right? This wisdom is an example of sarcasm. We know that sarcasm is the appraisal to dispraise. So the person is saying that we reject this wisdom from them, that this wisdom that we lack endeavor and purpose, and our striving to become a better people, to build our society as a Caribbean people, that we will fail on that note. Okay, so we resent them this wisdom, this freedom to be able to just comment and say what they want about us. We resent it. Back to sender. Okay, the person even gives us additional information and says, passing us toiling, waiting and watching, their cunning declension down to the sea. So they're passing us toiling and waiting and so on. That's an example of visual imagery, because the reader visualizes the river journeying to the south without any obstacle, while the person or the South is stuck in hard work. They're still building. And of course, we know that a lot of countries in the North actually build their society on the backs of slaves who were transported from West Africa. Notice that they're passing, toiling, waiting, and watching. They're cunning declension. So basically, the person is saying that as we are toiling and watching and waiting, they are just passing, smoothly flowing, going on their way in their crafty tactics. Okay, and notice that they're ending up at the same place the person wants to get to the sea. Okay, and it's very important to note that the persona has personified the river and even the ocean, okay, in this poem and in this stanza. Notice that stanza 4 begins the very way the poem begins in stanza 1, using words such as but today, which is an example of repetition. Right? Remember last time this was used, the person was telling us that he was going to recapture or re-experience the South once again. Okay, and we said that but suggests that something was done in the past, and regardless of what was done in the past, today the person is going to do something. Okay, so but today, no, I have made up my mind to follow you, river, to actually use the path, do the things that you do in order to get where I want to get to, which is the South. So, but today I will join you, traveling river. Notice the use of the personal pronoun you to refer to the river, which personifies the river, okay? Traveling river, that's an example of visual imagery. We can visualize the river flowing continuously, down to its destination. And it's also an example for the emphasize or further tells us that this is an example of personification, that is traveling river. Borne down the years of your patientest flowing. Borne down there means traveling down the years of your patientest flowing, right? You have continued to do things your way. I am going to follow you just so that I can get where I want to be at this moment in my life. In the third stanza line, the person says, past pains that will wreck us, okay? Past pain is an example of alliteration because the P in past and pain is alliterated. And it's really being alliterated in order to emphasize the pain that the person in the south will continue to encounter as they journey home. So past pain could be that the person, as the person on journeys to the south, following the path of the river, that he or she would be reminded of the different painful experience that his or her people had to endure as a result of the Atlantic slave trade, as a result of slavery, just the different things that will hurt the person once again. But the person is willing to take these trips, okay, to actually follow the path of the river. Also, it also reminds us that even past there can be the case where the person is actually walking by or traveling alongside these different things as he or she makes his way to the south. And it could even be things or pains that occurred in the past, things that the people of the Caribbean or even in Africa would have endured. For example, past pains records can even refer to the slaves and even the poor health conditions they were in as they were being transported from West Africa, right? It can even mean the way in which the men were packed together below deck, you know, the cramped spaces. It can even refer to the foul air, the seasickness, even the sanitation, the suffocation, the suffocating conditions that many of them actually endured in order to actually get to the south, okay? And by the south, I mean not necessarily the north, but to where they are, where they were sent to work as slave in the Caribbean. Okay, so past pains that will wreck, because notice that it will wreck them. It has the ability to actually not just soften them, but even to destroy them. The person is willing to actually endure or even re-experience this. Notice this poem occurs because the person wants to re-experience the south, and in order for the person to do so, he or she decides that I have to take the path of the river. And this also includes reminding the person of the different pains of his or her ancestors. Okay, notice the person went on and says even sorrow would arrest us. We will be reminded of the different sorrows we would have endured in the past, and it would arrest us because it will greatly affect us. Okay, and it went on and it says that the hatred that washes up on the flat, it as a result of traveling and just being re-experiencing my ancestors past, the different things we went through in the south because of the great powers and things like the slave transatlantic slave trade, the personal feelings of hatred will come up again, okay, even for the person, even on behalf of his or her ancestors. So past pains that will wreck us, sorrows arrest us, hatred that washes up on the flats. Okay, when we think about the flats are actually lands that has no hills or mountains. Okay, so the idea is there's this metaphorical idea of hatred washing up to the flat, hatred actually being remembered, hatred being created as a result of the persona visiting the experience of his or her ancestors, right? And of course, the flat is basically where the persona will end up at the end of the journey. And that's also example visual imagery, because it imagery depict the pain and the sorrow and even the hatred the person encounters as he or she takes the same path as the river in order to get to the south. And in the second to last line, the person says, and moving on through the plains that receive us. Notice the persona seem to be receiving by the plains, right? It seems there's some examples and ideas of hospitality which the persona suggests that you can find in the south, that warm welcoming feeling. So having experienced what the person experienced in the south, and deciding, you know what, in the north, and deciding that in order for me to get to the south, I need to take the path that the river is taking, even though the person won't have experience and even witness once again the pains that his or her ancestors would have endured. And notice that after all of that and the different sorrows that actually muffled up in the persona, that in the end the plains were there waiting to give the persona a hug, right, waiting to receive the persona. And notice that the person said that procession in turmoil, okay? A procession is actually a group of individuals moving along in an orderly, often ceremonial way, which suggests that the person is not alone, or the persons have actually followed the persona down the path of the river to come to the sea, to come to the north, in order to get to the ocean, in order to get to the south. Okay, so that's the end of stanza 4. So in stanza 5, the persona says that the bright waves splash up from the rock to refresh us. So in stanza 5, the persona has arrived finally in the south, and he or she is giving us a visual representation of what is occurring as a result of his entrance or his arrival in the south. The persona says that the bright waves splash up from the rocks to refresh us. Basically, the person is saying that nature is welcoming the persona and his other companions back to the south. And notice the visual imagery of bright waves, which gives us an idea of the person is delightful and is happy, and even nature seems to be celebrating as well as a result of their homecoming. And the word splash is an example of onomatopoeia because it appeals to the reader's sense of hearing, as we can actually hear the sounds of waves as they strike on the rock. Okay, and notice that it refreshes the person. Whatever the person would have endured in the north, whatever the memory or sorrows and pains that the person had to re-experience for himself and or even on behalf of him or her ancestors, notice that it seemed to the person as if it was all worth it, because now the person feels refreshed. Notice that the person shares with us via visual imagery that he or she sees blue sea urchins shift in their wake. So when they saw the persona and they actually got out of where they were in order for the person to see them, welcoming him or her back to the south. So they shift in their wake in order to signal their celebration and their approval of the person's decision to return to the north. The person also went on and says in line 3, and there, right, which is and notice that the word there is italized, right, which indicates the person's delight and points to even the little children. After and there is the touch of the fishermen's houses and the path made of pebbles. So the use of italization is there to highlight the persona's delight, because as if he says and there, right, and it therefore hooks our attention to what the person wants us to see. So the person wants us to pay attention to the touch of the fishermen's houses, the path made of pebbles. Notice the person is paying attention to all these details, and also he or she went on and said, and look, another exclamation there. We have even seen the use of the exclamation mark there to add emphasis and to indicate the person's excitement of seeing small urchins combing the beaches. So these can be seen, small urchins can be seen as little children, or even sea urchins themselves lying on the beach shore or the seashore, right? Or children just there because it's a common practice or a common thing to see just little children in the Caribbean at the beach, right? Even by themselves, because a lot of them who have grown up close to the shores or close to the sea can swim. They're actually good swimmers, okay? So small urchins combing the beaches, look up from their traps to salute us. Okay, so notice that even though the urchins, if we consider or we take urchins as sea creatures that live in water, right? Notice that as they saw the persona, they actually shift in their wake to greet the persona, and notice too that they actually look up from their traps. Even though they are trapped there, they look up from their trap to salute the persona. And when we salute someone, it's actually a gesture of respect or polite recognition. Okay, and the person says they remember us just as we left them. Okay, it tends to remind me of some persons when they leave the Caribbean, they go to the north and so on. The idea is that every details they want to remember how things were, and they're just surprised of just seeing things that they once knew being there when they return to their home in the Caribbean or to the south. Okay, so this is the end of stanza 5. We are close to stanza 6. Let's begin. Okay, stanza 6, the final stanza. The fisherman, harking the surf on this side of the reef, stands up in his boat and hollers. So those two lines are examples of visual imagery. We can visualize the persona scanning the breaking waves for familiar details, just like a hawk, right? And hollers us, tells us that the persona stood up and he said hello to the persona and his companions, right? And the person shares with us different things that he or she is seeing. He or she says that a starfish lies in its pool. Okay, a starfish is an example of symbolism because it is symbolic of infinite love. And notice that it's there lying in the pool as if it's there waiting on the person's arrival to remind the person that he or she should now be satisfied. He or she is now at home. He or she is now loved. A love that cannot be found in places such as the north. You have to return to the south for such a love where even the very creatures will remember you whenever you decide to come back home. The person went on in the last two lines there and says, and gulls, white sails slanted seaward, fly into the limitless morning before us. Okay, so sails slanted seaward, that's an example of alliteration. And what is being alliterated is the S song, as if it's, they want to create the sound of the sea, right? And it also emphasizes the seagulls with their white wings as they lean towards the open sea, right? And it's really to create the sound of the sea. The person is now close to the sea. And remember what we heard in stanza 1, or we were told by the person in stanza 1 that the sound of the sea actually brought him alive, because the person felt more alive when he or she was close to the sea. The shows where he or she was born. Okay, and the last line, we have an example of symbolism. Remember what we learned in the poem Orchids, that morning is symbolic of new beginnings or new possibilities. So it's as if the person is being told that now that you are here, the opportunities are limitless. You're not constrained, so you shouldn't have to be looking over your back because the shadows are here waiting to oppress you. You're now at home, you're now at peace, you're now with your own people. Welcome back. So here's a quick summary of the poem. You can always pause the video and have a read. Let's move on to the themes. What I have prepared here for you is the different figurative devices and poetic devices in this poem. Remember, I told you in a previous video that if CSEC asks you or a teacher for poetic devices, you can feel free to give anyone. But if they ask for literary devices or figurative devices, you must give only those. If you give a poetic devices, CSEC do not give you, your answer will be incorrect. Okay, you will not be graded for that particular question. So please learn the difference. I will try my best to do so in every video. So there are several themes in the poem South. Feel free to add any additional ones. What I have here are people and desires, conflicts and complications, places, nature, childhood experience, nostalgia, and discrimination. Likewise, the different tones can be found. If you can think of any more, go ahead and add them. The person was defensive at some point, right, by resenting, the criticism and the so-called wisdom. Calm, joyful, bitter, nostalgic, and there's some, sense of lamentation exploded the poem as well, or seen in the poem. So there, I have here listed 2 moods from the poem. As usual, feel free to add any more you can think of. I have nostalgic and reflective. Thank you for listening. Please check out my other videos, which should be on the screen any minute now.